the main event, a turkey, right? Now, we've all seen them. People spend hours and hours and hours trying to cook a bird that is so large and so misshapen that it's really difficult to cook it properly unless we change its shape, right? So short of completely breaking down the bird into its 8 basic parts, we're gonna do today what is called spatchcocking. I think it is the best cooking method. I think it's the easiest cooking method. And of course, you can use it on every bird that you have. So this works for geese, turkeys, chicken, quail, squab, whatever, right? So essentially what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut out the backbone, we're gonna butterfly the bird completely open, press it a little bit flat, that way it cooks more evenly. Because if we look at the anatomy of a turkey, right, it's a giant empty chamber. Inside it's nothing but air. And it takes a lot of energy and time to heat that air and to heat everything around it. And of course, what's around all this empty air is all of the bones, which is where we're really worried about making sure everything's cooked properly so nobody has the potential for salmonella or any other foodborne illness. So this is a very difficult way to cook a bird, especially when it's almost always cooked on its back, breast up, legs up. This is the meatiest part of the bird, so it stays completely dry. It gets really, really rubbery and tough, and it's just no good, right? So what we're gonna do is we have our standard turkey. This is about a 15-pound bird, right? We're gonna flip it over, and if we look at it, right, we have the shoulders up here where the wings attach obviously to the back, and we have kind of the hips down here. Now, most people don't have giant poultry shears, or they don't have huge cleavers or anything, so I thought today we would just use a basic utility knife, right? It's a normal knife that everybody should have, and we don't have to worry about having specialty tools. But what we need to do is make sure that it is sharp, and we need to make sure that we have good control over it. Most people hold a knife like this, and they put their finger on the backbone of the knife, and it's really not very well controlled. What you should do is the natural notch between the blade and the handle, that's where your fingers go, and then your thumb wraps up over the knife. That way you have perfect control of it. If you need even more control as we start butchering, you take this finger and you just kind of pinch it right here. That way we have complete balance of the knife. We can control it that much better. Especially when we get in here. The bones can be a little sharp, so we need to make sure to move slow and intelligently so we don't injure ourselves, right? I want to make sure that you spatchcock for years to come, not just try it once and give up. Okay, so we see the bird. It has a natural line from the shoulders down to the thighs. We can kind of start to loosen up the hip joint. You might hear it pop a little bit. That's a good sign for us, right? You might hear that. We take the shoulders. We'll do the same, loosen those up. And so what we do is we take our utility knife. We will cut down, and you'll see your knife should just go right through the meat down here by the backbone. And then we can open it up. We already see the entire hip joint. We can pull it, get our utility knife in there, cut straight through. We look on the other side. If you need to help out your knife a little bit, give yourself an easy window. Make sure you can see what you're doing, right? We don't try to cut stuff with our eyes closed. We don't want to be scared of it. We definitely don't want to injure ourselves. So we go straight down. We want to cut all the way through. And I can see that I've already cleaned the legs out. And now we have to worry about the ribs, right? Now the ribs are where it's going to be very, very sharp. A lot of tiny bones, they're very sharp. They're easy to cut through. So a lot of times what I'll recommend is we just kind of use the tip of our knife. We just punch down through. Make sure we cut through there. Same on this side. Right? And then we can even turn our bird sideways here. We can cut through all of this connective tissue. And then we just keep going right up the ribs. Right? We take it here, we can bend it back. This is where the backbone naturally splits in two. We set that aside, and now we just have to work on the upper part of the back. You can face the bird towards you if it's easier, right? Watch our knife go straight through. We're still just following the natural line of the ribs. We get up here to the wings. We can see where it attaches. You'll stretch it until it cracks. Your knife will go through. We'll do it on this side as well. Make sure that you cut all the way through everything. I do it pretty quickly, but take as much time as you need to make sure that you're doing it safely. Now, up here we can see here's the wishbone. If you want to remove it and dry it out completely, because if that's a family tradition for you, go ahead and just very easily just trim that out, pull it straight out. Super, super simple. This turkey has a lot of neck skin left over. We'll trim that just a little bit, set that aside, and when we turn our bird over, right, now it's completely opened up. This is what it looked like before. right? And then now we took out the backbone, we can turn its legs out. We take our wings. I like to tuck mine under as if it's kind of relaxing on the beach, right? This is what keeps the wing tips from burning. Then we take our breast, push it down, and you see now we have a much more even cooking surface, right? So we'll transfer this to a baking tray, and what we'll do is we'll leave it as is. I like to season just with salt and pepper. If you have some kind of family recipe, go crazy. What we don't need to do is stuff the skin with this cooking technique. By cooking it like this, the skin is all up, so it stays super, super crispy. It is gonna be completely moistened because it's gonna cook very, very fast. We will put this into a 450 Fahrenheit oven, and the rule of thumb is it takes 5 minutes per pound. So with a 15-pound turkey, this will be done in about an hour and a half, max. Now, that's like a very loose guideline. Of course, the best way to do it is to check temperatures. Check the temperature at the thickest part of the breast and right down here at the thickest part of the thigh bone. If your turkey comes with one of these convenient little pop-up, it's done things, it doesn't really apply to spatchcock. Take that out, get rid of it, okay? It's a really unreliable tracking method. So here's our spatchcock. Super, super simple. Couldn't be easier. All right, so we have our spatchcock turkey. We had a beautiful Thanksgiving. Everybody had a lot of fellowship. Everybody's super happy. But now we still have leftovers. What do we do? This is a question I get all the time. So I think some things that we can do, especially since we're in the South, we're here in Texas, some things that we can do to make it extra delicious is we can make turkey and dumplings, right? This is one of those things that people love, but I don't know many people who actually make them that aren't chefs, right? Maybe your grandparents do, maybe your mom does, but by and large, I think the younger generation doesn't really handle it too much. So we're gonna make it even easier by using our leftover turkey gravy, our leftover turkey, and whatever vegetables that we have left over from the table. Today we will have peas, but if you're a family that has green beans or, carrots or anything like that, it can all go into the sauce and it'll be beautiful, right? So right here in the pot, I have my leftover gravy. Now, I say gravy, not stock, because the gravy should be thickened, typically with flour, but probably also with cornstarch. Now, that's important because we don't want it to be like a super thick, difficult thing for us to handle. It still needs to be kind of like a soup texture, right? So as I'm looking at it, I'm reheating it a little bit, it's re-emulsifying. I'm gonna add some heavy cream to it. The cream is what's gonna make it extra delicious. It's gonna give it a ton of flavor. It's gonna make it turn into more of an unctuous sauce for us as we start moving forward, right? Now what I'm gonna do here is we're just gonna gently stir that together, right? We don't need to work too hard on it, but you can tell if you can see the color, it's kind of a cafe au lait color. It's very, very beautiful. We have a whole bunch of herbs, plus we have all the flavor that have matured from our gravy as it has sat and gotten even stronger in flavor. So here I will also add some peas. My family loves peas. I like them with my dumplings, right? Straight in they go. And we just let this thing kind of heat up to kind of a very light boil. We don't want a rolling boil on this at any point in time, but we definitely want it to be hot because what we're gonna do is we're gonna poach our dumplings. So I'll keep a lid on it to trap all that beautiful heat in there, and then we'll move on to our dumplings, right? So we have our milk, flour, baking powder, and melted butter. Of course, this could be any fat that you want. This could be any dairy that you want. It technically does not have to have dairy, but between dairy and butter, those, dairies and all the sugars in there will keep it nice and soft. If you were to use water and oil, they'll be slightly crispier dumplings. Even though we're gonna poach them, we still have to worry about the final texture. Right, baking powder we need, but the flour is where we can have the most kind of leeway, right? Today I'm gonna be using all-purpose flour. That's typically what we use, but you can also use a whole wheat flour. You can add some rye flour. You can use teff. You can use anything. I would say don't go beyond half and half. If you were to use like all whole wheat flour or all rye flour, these will be super, super, super dense. But if we add like a quarter, subtract a quarter of the all-purpose flour, sub it for a quarter total weight or volume of the all-purpose flour, it'll have a much more delicious kind of earthy flavor. And so couldn't be simpler. We're gonna combine our flour and our baking powder. All right, and you see I've got a very small bowl here. We can season it any way we want. We can add a little bit of salt. We can add just a touch of pepper. Right, the dumplings, most people are really just looking for that beautiful texture. It absorbs mostly the sauce here because it poaches in there. So we don't need to go too crazy seasoning this, but we'll come in with our milk. We'll add it nice and slow. You can create a well in the center, very much like we do with pasta if you want. And then of course, we come in with our melted butter at the end. This could be any fat. If you have a ton of turkey drippings left over, it could be that also. It could be bacon fat, but today we're gonna use butter to keep it kind of more traditional. We check on this, we've got a lot of good heat working. So we're gonna take this and we're mixing it just until it combines, right? If you've got kids or you need something for someone to do, make them do this by hand. It'll give them something to do, they'll feel accomplished, they'll have to obviously wash their hands afterwards, but it's kind of a nice way for people to start getting connected to their food again. And all we're doing is mixing it until it is combined. We don't do this in a mixer, we don't try to get like full hydration of the flour, we just want it to be moistened all the way through, and it should be a very, very loose batter. This is a very close cousin to what the original like fruit cobblers would use. So just think of that when we start working towards the texture, like a very, very, very soft biscuit. So we're still mixing. Want to make sure it's really evenly done. This can be done a little bit ahead of time. If you have some leftovers and you're up a little early for breakfast and no one else is ready yet, you can go ahead and mix this ahead of time, set it aside, and then when it's time to make your dumplings, they're already done. You can even pre-portion them and leave them chilled for a couple hours. I wouldn't recommend doing it overnight. We want to make sure that these stay really, really tender, and then the longer they sit, the more that gluten is going to form, and it's going to make them a little more tough as they go, right? So you can see we've got a nice dough forming here. I can get a little more assertive with it, and that is our dumpling batter. So again, we can make this a little bit ahead of time, we can set this aside, and then if you are somebody who is very, very particular about everything being just the absolute perfect shape, you can use a scoop, you can put this in a piping bag and kind of pipe it in there like you would gnocchi perhaps, or of course we can do it a little more hands-on, and what we will do is we'll just drop them straight in here. Now I want to make sure that I've got a good amount of heat, so I check this again. I need to make sure that there's a lot of steam coming off there. It's just below a boil. Technically, this is where we would call like a scalding temperature. And what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna get in here and we just drop them right in. We wanna do it about a tablespoon at a time. We're not trying to make these gargantuan dumplings, and we can just keep dropping them. Try not to drop them directly on each other, but they will kind of swirl around and poach as they're cooking, right? Now poaching is where we cook something in liquid, so ideally these won't dry out because they're in liquid. As long as you've followed and kept the dumplings very, very soft and you're putting them straight in the liquid, these should be super, super tender, super, super delicious. And of course, we saved ourselves a ton of time with the sauce by using our leftover gravy, right? That's as much as my pot can hold for now. So we will put a lid on, and what we're gonna do is we will poach these for about 15 minutes, right? Periodically give it a little stir, or what I like to do as long as I have handles is I'll actually just rotate it. We just wanna make sure that they're not sticking together and poaching into one giant dumpling, because then it won't cook properly. So we just give it a little stir, and we'll check on it in about 10 minutes, see where we're at. All right, so our dumplings are coming up on the 10-minute mark. I removed my lid. Don't be surprised if there's some foaming and bubbling. There's a lot of fresh flour that we just dropped in there, but I can give it a quick stir, and I gotta tell you, they look awesome, right? They look super delicious. They've grown, they've blossomed into these beautiful doughy little, nuggets, and we can't wait to eat them. But obviously, we need to use our leftover turkey as well. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take part of the leg, because for me, that's where all the flavor is, and we need to have as much meat as we can handle. Now, we can put the skin in there, but honestly, it's kind of a waste since we're gonna be poaching it. So what I like to do is I can just peel that skin right off. And again, for anybody who's really like super into the crispy skin, that's where it is. We take our leg, we can break it down, we can pull the bone right out of it. Save all of your bones, because this is how we make a beautiful turkey stock. If you make a really, really good turkey stock and then reduce it, you're already halfway to next year's perfect turkey gravy, and then it's gonna be super, super concentrated in flavor. Right, we're just gonna come through, cut our turkey, just kind of haphazardly, right? Different sizes, different textures, it's gonna be really great. But we need to heat it back up, and we wanna soften it because chances are good this was in your fridge, right? So it's gonna start drying out the longer it sits. So we will drop our turkey in there. I think we can go for just a little bit more. So we'll take some, you can even just rip into it like a barbarian. Again, if you've got kids or you've got somebody with idle hands who needs to be doing something, just hand them a turkey leg and be like, hey, start shredding this meat. Like, let's make this happen, right? My dumplings are looking great. We've got about 3 more minutes on them. We'll drop our meat in. The colder your turkey is, the earlier you can add it. Of course, you could have it in there from the beginning. Nothing's gonna happen to it because we're not cooking at a super high temperature. We're just kind of poaching this all together. So we set that aside, clean up our board here, get some clean hands, and what we'll do is we'll stir this together. It looks great, it smells great. Of course, in the pastry and the professional kitchen, we always say taste everything, taste, taste, taste. So make sure you're tasting. The real fear here is that as the gravy has sat overnight and concentrated a little bit more, it may be over salty. It's really hard to take that out, but what we can do is we can add more liquid to it to kind of dilute some of that over saltiness. If you're looking at it and it's super, super thick, like it looks kind of like extra bubbly, too thick, like kind of gooey, start adding a little bit more of your heavy cream or water as you want. If it's too thin, of course, we can add just a little bit of roux or a touch of flour, stir very quickly, try not to mess up your dumplings, and then we will be good to go, right? We're coming up on, these are looking great. I put a cover, give it a quick stir, and then I start preparing my service vessel, right? Now, chicken and dumplings typically served as is. It's kind of its own composed little thing. Something else we could do with this is if we had the filling and we wanted to omit the dumplings, right? If we had the liquid, the turkey, the leftover gravy, we had the beautiful texture. This is also very close to a pot pie filling. So if you've got an unbaked pie shell or you've got some savory dough left over, go ahead and put it out. Put this in there, make sure this is cold first, otherwise you'll start melting your dough. But if you have some leftover liquid from your chicken and dumplings, you can turn this into a chicken and or turkey and dumplings pot pie later. So many uses for our leftovers. We can kill the heat here. We will grab our ladle and we can start ladling this into our plate. So you see we got these big, beautiful dumplings. Our sauce looks awesome. And it's not cold in Texas yet, but when it is, there's not much better than this on a cold day. You'll see me at the farmer's market most Saturday mornings, and when it's cold especially, I like a really nice warm meal when I get home. If it's chicken or turkey and dumplings, even better. So there we are. Turkey and dumplings in half the time because we made so much of it yesterday or a couple days ago. Boom. All right, so something that we've seen with our leftovers is we've made our turkey and dumplings. Now, another thing that we can do that I love so much, and a lot of my chef friends really love that most people don't know about, is a hot brown. Now, a hot brown is a super delicious sandwich that is pretty traditional for the Kentucky Derby. It is an open-faced turkey sandwich with Mornay, bacon, some parsley, and tomato. And we're gonna make almost a direct representation of that. But again, we're gonna have a huge shortcut with our leftover turkey gravy and of course our leftover turkey. But it starts with bacon. I know that bacon is probably the most popular thing ever. Everybody loves it. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it because I know what I'm gonna be serving it on, right? My bread rolls are gonna be left over from dinner. And we will cut our bacon down so that we don't have these huge strips of bacon hanging over. Now, I don't know anybody who gets overly upset about that, but as a chef, I like people to be able to eat the food I assemble for them the way I assembled it for them. So we'll cut down our bacon, that way as it reduces, it'll be nice and easy. Now, I said it's an open-faced sandwich. Of course, you can use any bread that you want. I'm gonna be using our leftover rolls from our meal, but if you have a delicious giant loaf of sourdough like I sell at the farmer's market, or if you have Mrs. Baird's from the grocery store, or whatever beautiful loaf that somebody made for you, go for it, right? If you have a sweet potato loaf, if you wanna use a cinnamon bun and cut it in half, that's your prerogative. I don't judge. But it starts with bacon. We're gonna cook that down. We're gonna render it real nice. This, of course, could be done ahead of time, but we need to reserve some of that bacon fat. So while we're cooking it, we're gonna let it do its thing, right? We wanna make sure that it's cooked over kind of a medium heat. This needs to be fully rendered bacon. That way we get all that beautiful fat in there. All right, so while we're waiting on our bacon, why don't I tell you a little bit about how I got started. I've actually been cooking my entire life with a name like Joe Baker. You know, you're kind of born to do it. I grew up in kind of depressed areas of the world, Appalachia and Montana, and so we just were kind of hunters and gatherers and gardeners, and so we've been in the kitchen our whole lives. I obviously went off to the Army when I was 18. I did, you know, all the combat stuff. I was an infantryman, and then when I got out, I said, I'm gonna get back to cooking, which was, people think it's a big departure, but kitchens run a lot like the military. There's a lot of rank and file and ego and stuff like that goes into it. And then I went into high-end cooking and worked in a couple different countries. I lived in Mexico for a while. I've worked with some famous chefs all over the world. But really what it's about for me is teaching people how to cook, right? Food should be accessible. I know that so many people, especially in the pastry side of the kitchen, are intimidated. They're worried about everything not working out right, and it's so scientific, which by and large is true. But as long as you have somebody there to help guide you and kind of demystify it, I think everybody will have a much better time. Now, this year has been a rough year for everybody. I know that there are probably going to be smaller celebrations overall, so maybe there's more opportunity for these leftovers than you would have had in years past. So here are a couple of great examples that you can, of course, build on for your own family and for your own likes as we go. All right, so our bacon is looking really, really great. We can go ahead and start pulling that out. I know these are kind of comically small pieces for your average diner, but I promise you when we're done, it'll be a perfect bite. We're gonna go ahead and put those on some paper towel to drain. And what we need is we need some of this fat left over, but bacon creates a whole lot, so we're gonna pour off some and keep some, right? Now be very careful handling hot fat. Be very careful the container you pour it into. You need to make sure that it is heat stable. And instead of pouring it down the drain, which I hope we all know is terrible for the environment, if you pour it into a container, let it solidify, you can just throw it out in the trash, it's no problem. Or of course, you can save it and you've got an entire container of bacon fat. So you can use them in place of your other fats if you want to. Like if you saw our turkey and dumplings, it could have been turkey and bacon dumplings, which sounds pretty great to me, right? So we have our fat, we're gonna add some flour. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a really fast roux out of this, right? So we're gonna stir this together. Same pan, I don't like doing too many dishes if I don't have to. And a roux is obviously just a mixture of flour and fat. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna thicken our sauce for us later. But what we wanna do is cook it to where we have a little bit of flavor on it. We don't wanna just toss it in here until we get our basic roux and then go from there. We're gonna have a lot of flavor from the bacon fat already, but we should still cook it to get just a touch of color. Right? We don't want a pure blonde roux, but if you've ever worked or eaten or studied anything about gumbo and how they cook those roux, you can obviously cook this for an entire day almost, cook it like a medium to low heat, periodically stir it, and what you'll see is it'll slowly transform colors. It'll become kind of a hazelnut brown, it'll turn into a reddish color, and then it'll even start getting like a black color, not burned, but fully adulterated black, which gives us even more flavor, makes it super delicious, right? So we're gonna let this cook for at least 2 minutes, I say. If you've got an hour, cook it for an hour. Stir it periodically, it'll just give you that much more flavor, right? Now what we're gonna do with this is we're gonna take our leftover turkey gravy again, and we're gonna have some milk. It is in equal portions, and we're gonna make a very loose Mornay sauce. Now, a Mornay is a fortified bechamel that has cheese in it, right? So if you know how to make a bechamel and you add cheese, you have Mornay. Now what that says for us is we can use any cheese we want. Today I will be using Monty Jack because I think it is the most easy on the palate. It's kind of easy for every diner. But if you know that your family and friends and everybody wants pepper jack cheese or super hard cheddar, go for it. Any cheese will work, right? I'm feeling good about my roux, so I will go ahead and add my gravy back in. Right? It getting hot and bubbling right away is not a problem at all for us. We'll switch to a whisk. We'll come in with our milk. And we're just whisking, whisking, whisking. You can see I'm still using my saute pan or skillet if you want to call it that. And what we're going to do is we're going to cook it until we get a nice thick sauce, right? We don't want to add our cheese too early because it'll inhibit the way that the Mornay will form. So we need to make sure that we have a full bechamel before we go further. And of course, we've kind of created a shortcut here by using our turkey gravy that's left over. So I'm not going to add too much salt or pepper until the very end because obviously the bacon is salty, our gravy is probably very salty, and our gravy should also have a decent amount of pepper flavor already. So we'll keep cooking this until it starts to thicken. You see I'm just stirring it to keep it moving, trying to get that roux to incorporate into the liquid. It'll take a minute or two. It shouldn't take more than that. You can cook this as hot as you can mix it. If you want to stand here and mix super, super fast, you can cook it very hot. What I don't ever recommend is making this in the microwave. I am all about taking shortcuts where I can, but a microwave heats things very unevenly. And for a beautiful sauce, it's really better to have your hands involved, and that way you can monitor it through the entire process. So we're going to set this here. We don't have to stir nonstop, so we'll just check on it every minute or so. So we move all this out of the way. We have our cheese ready to go. Our bacon is ready to go. We can reach over here. We definitely need to get our tomato ready to go. Today I'm just using a beautiful Roma tomato. You can use beefsteaks, or if you have something really awesome in your garden, or your local farmer has something for you, use whatever you want. Now, if you are pro-turkey but anti-pork, you do not have to use bacon in this. We just need some kind of fat to where we can make our roux. If you want to use some of the turkey drippings that are left over, or if you just want to use butter or oil, that's perfectly fine. If you want to omit all of this and try and go just vegetarian but still have the cheese, that's on you. I'm sure that you probably understand all of your substitutions already. But as you see, our sauce is getting nice and thick, right? It's not going to be super thick like pudding, but it is going to get thicker. As I stir it, it moves a little slower. It has more buoyancy, so it'll really help us out. We're going to griddle this together. So what I can do is get my bread ready, and we will just use our leftover dinner rolls, and I will just cut these right in half. Super, super easy. Again, this can be any bread that you have convenient to you. Set that there. And these will be like our little hot brown sliders, right? It's going to be excellent. We will set all of this aside. We are almost ready to go. We'll need one more slice of tomato. Our sauce is looking great. So now what I will do is I will turn off the heat. We can leave it on the stove or on our cooktop, as you see here. We've got good buoyancy, and I will start adding my cheese. Now I'm adding sliced cheese because it's easier for me. If you have shredded cheese, that's perfectly fine. Again, if you've got somebody who needs something to do, hand them a block of cheese and have them grate it. I promise you they won't be asking for much more for the next hour. I do it with my kids all the time, and it makes my life so much easier. Right? So we add our cheese in, then we're going to increase our heat to a very low heat, but we want to make sure that we're melting that cheese really, really nicely. It'll incorporate. It should start smelling really good, right? It'll melt in there. Your shredded cheese, if you shred it extra fine, will incorporate very, very quickly. This is also kind of the start of like a Alfredo sauce, depending on the cheese you use. But you'll see the sauce will get nice and thick. If it starts getting super thick, like it's getting kind of gummy from all the cheese, just add a splash of water. It'll re-emulsify the fats, and it'll be much, much easier for you to handle moving forward, right? So we just want to make sure this is evenly mixed. At this point, if you've got a really good blender or an immersion blender or something like that, you can put this in there, turn it on high, completely emulsify it, and then you've got a completely blended, easy sauce. You can make Mornay ahead of time, but because of the amount of cheese in there, a lot of times it gets very, very firm and a little difficult to work with, right? So we're mixing. It looks great. We're going to leave it on low heat for a second. I want to add some parsley in here. So we get our fresh flat leaf parsley. We're just going to rough chop it. We don't need to worry too much about how it looks. Of course, if you have dried parsley, if that's your speed, go for it. If you have Italian frilly parsley, also fine. You don't have to have parsley at all, but I think it's a really beautiful presentation. And honestly, I like the flavor of parsley. I think it's often overused for appearance and underused for flavor. So we get that in there, right? My sauce is bubbling. It's looking great. I know what this sauce should look like. It's got a really nice texture to it. If you've ever had Eggs Benedict, it's a very similar texture to the sauce that goes on an Eggs Benedict, right? So we will set this aside. And so we will take our sandwich. We will take some leftover turkey again. Again, I love the dark meat. If you're a white meat person, go crazy. If you want to do a combo, it's yours. Make it any way that you want. It's an open-faced sandwich. You make it as meaty and hearty as you would like. This could obviously be pre-cut. You can use any other meat that you want. A hot brown is traditionally made with turkey, so it's perfect for Thanksgiving. But if you like the sandwich, but you want ham or steak or something like that, also fine. This is all for you. I want you guys just to feel empowered to get in the kitchen, use up these leftovers, make something extra delicious, and have a wonderful, wonderful meal. So we have our sandwiches, a little bit more turkey. We will come through with another slice of cheese, just right in the middle there. We'll add some bacon. And of course, I'm one of the people who's like, yeah, bacon's not that great. I know that's kind of sacrilegious. I think people use bacon when they shouldn't. I think they should just make great tasting food and then add bacon to it. So if you want to add a ton of bacon to yours, go for it. We'll drizzle some sauce over. as much sauce as you want. It's completely up to you. But we've got that gravy, the dairy, and of course some cheese. And it'll all come together really beautifully when we put it into our oven. Now you can broil this or you can bake it. If you bake it, obviously the bread will get toastier. If you broil it, you're very likely to get a little scorching on your sauce. It's not a bad thing. It just might kind of alarm you when you see it the first time. There's a lot of fat, there's a lot of cheese in there, so it's gonna blister and scorch, and it's delicious, but it is a little alarming the first time you see it. So we have our sandwiches, we go into the oven, and then we cook them until they are all blistery and delicious. All right, so our hot brown has been in the oven for a couple minutes. We just want to make sure that that sauce sets. We want to kind of slowly wilt the tomatoes. We obviously want to heat everything through. It's super awesome, delicious. It's an open-faced sandwich. If you want to try and close it and take it on the go, you definitely can. But by and large, it's served just like that. They can be bigger or smaller. You can use any cheese you want. You can add more parsley, more cheese, more vegetables, any bread that you have. But there's a hot brown. We talked about turkey and dumplings. We showed you how to spatchcock. I want to wish everybody from the bottom of my heart a very happy Thanksgiving. 2020 has been rough on everybody. So get out there, cook some food, enjoy it, and just be with friends and family.